3 years ago, when I started this channel, I was doing all of the standard booktube videos, including a 5-star predictions video. I talked about 10 books that I thought I would give 5 stars. Since then, I've stopped giving star ratings, but I still haven't read all the books on that list.
Hello, if you are new here, my name is Roisin, and the 2 books that have eluded me over the past 3 years are Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, and Feral. One fiction, one non-fiction. Feral is by Georges Monbiot and is about rewilding. Monbiot is a writer that I have kind of ambivalent feelings about. Some of the things he says I really agree with, and some of them I really don't. I don't know if perhaps I agreed with him more when I put this on the list, or if I knew less about him, and that's why I put it on the list. So it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, is historical fiction set in 18th century France, and it was adapted into a film with Ben Whishaw and Alan Rickman that I really loved when I was a teenager, which inspired me to try and read this book, but I still haven't. It's kind of a modern classic. It came out in 1985, and I think I'm going to start with this one.
Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, tells the tale of Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, a young orphan on the streets of Paris in the 18th century with an extraordinary sense of smell, but no personal scent of his own. He travels through a nasty, brutal life as a strange young child until he becomes a perfumer's apprentice, seeking to create the most perfect scent in the world, and committing a few murders on the way.
I am now 100 pages into Perfume, The Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind, and I have to say the writing isn't quite hitting me the way that I wanted it to. It's not quite as sensuous and descriptive, and like it gives you a lot of proper nouns, a lot of words for things, and sort of minute descriptions, as in like moss-coated pine wood, but it doesn't really give you like adjectives and feelings. And I think it's because Grenouille, our main character, is able to smell things, and he only really learns words when he knows the name of the smell. So he is very much focused in the concrete, even though he's obviously the sense of the realm of scent is abstract rather than concrete, but he is focused on the concrete things that create the smells rather than the sense of feeling and the emotion. Although there are lots of like lists of things that are quite decadent, it's not quite as sumptuous and immersive and visceral as I thought it would be. It's good, I'm enjoying it, but it's just not quite at the level that I wanted it to be. It doesn't feel tangible, and maybe that's because it's an intangible thing, we're talking about scent. But yeah, and it is making me want to buy Perfume. It is definitely working in that respect. Also, it's set in the 18th century in France, and it does things that other novels I have read set at a similar time period do, where there is a lot of like lists of things and sort of hyperbole and a very present narrative voice that feels separate from the characters. It feels like a character in and of itself, which I think maybe comes from 18th century novels. I'm trying to write a novel akin to one of those. It reminds me of Golden Hill by Francis Spufford, and God, the one about the guy who eats a lot. Like eats everything, wants to try eating every different thing in France. I can't remember what that one's called. So it does. I think that probably does come from 18th century novels. The only 18th century novel I have read is Walter Scott, so I'm not super au fait with how they work, but I think it must be from that because it's so common to books set at that time. Funny, it kind of reminds me of Lemony Snicket in a way, that very present narrative voice again, but the way that it's commenting on the people and the time in this kind of dry, dark humour kind of a way. Not super dark, but it has enjoyment in the darker side of things in life. So it is, I think, a fun novel more than what I was hoping for, which was kind of a rich novel. But it's definitely readable, and we'll see if it becomes more intriguing, uncomfortable, eerie as we go through the novel, because it is the story of a murderer. We've already had one murder, and I know there are many more to come. I'm going to a dinner party this evening, later today, and I have been tasked with making dessert. So I'm gonna make these fig and frangipani tarts, except I'm gonna use raspberries instead of figs, because it's not fig season. So I'm just gonna get on my bike and go to the supermarket.
I struggled a little bit with this book. It really lost its way, I feel like, in the middle. There was a lot of setup for very little payoff, and I definitely got bored, which is not great considering it is mostly a plotty book. Considering the kind of gothic, strange subject matter, you think there would be more atmosphere and more going on, but really it is just a kind of plotty, almost satirical, not really satirical, but slightly wry look at the life of this young man. And none of the characters are particularly developed in any way. It is supposed to be just a sort of revelry in this disgust and this darkness, which is something that I can enjoy, but I don't think was done particularly well because it wasn't particularly immersive in this case. I think it was just okay.
Hello, today I'm going to make a big pot of soup because it is summer, but it really doesn't feel like it. And also because in our veg box this week we got this obscenely giant courgette, which is obviously going to be mostly water and so probably not very tasty on its own. So if I chop it up small, cook it with all, oh god, sun just got brighter, it won't last very long. Anyway, this courgette. So if I could chop it up and fry it with all the other vegetables and make a nice soup for lunchy dinner kind of thing, because it's currently 11 AM, so yeah, probably lunchtime it'll be ready. Yeah, make a giant soup. Hello, I'm only about 50 pages into Feral by George Monbiot, but the man knows how to write. Beautiful sentences, like, above the roar of the waves I could hear the pebbles rattling against the battlements like grape shot, as the sea sucked and sagged at the stonework. The tide had risen, and ugly jumbled breakers were smashing on the sea wall. 200 yards from the shore I hesitated. Even from where I sat I could see that the waves were stained brown with the shingle they flung up. I could hear them crack and slough against the wall. It's just really evocative, and it's really making me feel like I am in the places that he's in. However, as I said, I'm 50 pages in, and so far, not really about rewilding. So far, it is mostly anecdotes of him communing with nature, because he wants to talk about two types of rewilding. Allowing nature to take back control, and also rewilding of the human soul and connecting us with nature. So yeah, really great writing, but we'll see if it gets like political, because I think of George Monbiot as quite a political writer. Hello, so I am 120 pages into this book now, which is about halfway. I'm here, but like all good non-fiction, all of this is notes and index and things, so I'm about halfway through the actual book. And I am enjoying reading it. George Monbiot is a really great writer, a really excellent nature writer. He makes you feel like you're properly among the habitat that he is talking about. All Hallows Eve, Nos Galan Gaeth. Early frost and still days had engineered a blazing autumn. The birches looked like a shower of gold coins. An occasional beech tree flamed against the pale ash leaves and the mauve-brown oaks. The sun was a pewter gleam behind the clouds, and the air was almost still. There was a thickness to the day, as if it had been laid on with oil paint, or as if air and leaf and ground were the flesh of a single organism. The berries of the hawthorn exuded from the woods like specks of blood. It's a really wonderful description, and I really enjoy that. But it is a lot of anecdotes of him travelling around and less of facts and information. It has certainly gotten there more now. I've read the chapter on bringing back the wolf, which also talks about rewilding lynx and beavers, and greening the desert, and sort of growing trees and forests in places where there used to be forest and there now is not. There's like scrubland or grassland, and yeah, he does bring more facts in. He's talked a lot about how people have been reintroducing the wolf across Europe and European rewilding, and how it's more popular on the continent than it is here in the UK, and how like what reasons there are for that, the vast amount of land ownership in the UK from a very small number of people, for example. And so yeah, it is very well written, but it hasn't quite got into a place where I feel like I'm learning huge amounts yet. But it does remind me of other books that I have read in this vein, like Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and what was it called? Islands of Abandonment by Cal Flynn. It reminds me of both of those in terms of the style of writing and the sort of deep connection with nature. Sometimes he does lose me a bit with he says he feels discomfort with people who talk about plants growing well where they are loved and things like that, but then he also has this, I felt when I put this deer on my back like I was from the primordial times, and it must be a connection, a sort of genetic memory, rather than it just being what he assumed he would feel at that time, and how he was primed to feel that way by the way that he has lived his life. But yes, it is interesting. I would like to see how he talks about how this would interact with people, particularly poorer people. He does touch a bit on how rewilding could increase wages and profitability in certain areas, but I would like to see more about how he talks about how you can rewild without forcing people out of their homes who will always inevitably not be the rich people. So we'll see if it goes there later. My friend Sarah Graham, who wrote this wonderful book, is having in conversation with a Pankhurst. I can't remember her first name. Helen Pankhurst, the granddaughter of a Pankhurst, one of the famous ones. So I am going to that talk now this evening. I'm going on the train, I'm going to take my book with me, and yeah, I'll see you when I get back. But yeah, looking forward to it, and if you haven't read Rebel Bodies, you probably should.
Have you ever read a non-fiction book and thought, this could have been an article? That's kind of the way I feel about Feral. There are some really interesting ideas and some absolutely stunning nature writing, as I spoke about earlier in the video. George Monbiot is definitely an excellent writer and very good at evoking places. But a lot of these chapters are just a series of anecdotes about his own personal relationship with where he lives. Particularly, he is focused on the part of Wales he lives in, and that makes it very, very repetitive. He also uses the same style a lot of the time when he's introducing a new animal that he's discovered during one of these anecdotes, where he will describe what's going on but avoid naming the creature itself. But he does it so many times that it loses all power. I think this whole book is just a little too long for what George Monbiot was trying to say, and I think I would have preferred an article.
Neither of these books ended up being new favourite books. They were both worthwhile to read, but I don't love either of them. And I'm going to do a reaction video to that 5-star predictions that I filmed back in the beginning of my channel, because I've read them over the course of 3 years, so I can't remember if any of them actually did make it to be new favourite books. Over the past 3 years, my reading taste has changed, or I have understood more what my reading taste is, because back in 2019, before I started my channel, I read 38 books that year, which is still good, still more than the average reader, but every year since I've read more than 100 books. And so obviously my taste, I've got to know much more in depth what sort of book I actually like, and also I'm comparing books a lot more. Like if I've read 38 books, then it only, to be my favourite book, it just has to beat 37 other books. Whereas if I've read 144 books, which I think I read during the pandemic, then it has to beat 143 books. So it's a rather different challenge for the book and for me to find some new favourites. But I definitely think my taste has changed. I definitely think I would be buying different books now, but I'm glad that I finally read these two. And I did a more recent 5-star predictions, which I will leave linked in the cards above if you want to go and check that out. So we'll have to see how well I do reading those. Hopefully it'll take less than 3 years to manage, and see if I'm better at knowing what I would like now than I was then. Thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below. Are you any good at knowing what books you will definitely love? I would love to hear from you, and I will see you again very soon. I put out new videos twice a week, so thank you for watching. Bye bye.